I would like to welcome you to our annual exercise in public input into the county budget process. I'm Rick Pollitt. I'm your county executive, so far, first and only, and it's been my honor to conduct these exercises now for 6 years. This is our sixth effort in going out among our community to talk about just what it is about Wicomico County that we want to strengthen and preserve and to work for in the coming year to be sure that our community is everything that it should be. The kind of place where our children can go to school and get a superior education and then graduate and be able to compete with students from all over the world for the best jobs. A community that's safe, where we can go to sleep at night relatively secure in our homes. That we can drive down our county roads without fear of hitting potholes and going into whiplash or throwing our cars out of alignment. There's a lot of things that we're charged to do for our community, and we're only as good as the people that we serve. And so we do look forward to these opportunities to ask you for your input, for your suggestions, and even your complaints, because we learn by those. And so I do thank you for attending tonight. Now, before I go on, I would also like to say thank you to PAC-14. PAC-14 is a steadfast supporter of county government and city government. They're always there to help let us display ourselves to the public. It's kind of a windows on the government. It allows the people who don't get out as often as they'd like to see just what we do, and again, watch us in the process. So it's always nice to have PAC-14 here, and we certainly appreciate you taking time to give us the time over the air for people to see us. This is our budget hearing. As always, we're not here to present a completed budget product, although we're farther along this year than we normally are. Usually this is a process that's evolving by the time we come to the public. Normally, especially coming on the heels of the end of the General Assembly, we have a pretty good feel for what's coming down from Annapolis that we will have to accommodate with the county budget. Our schedule requires us to turn a balanced budget over to the County Council next Tuesday. We will do that. We will be ready. Tonight is an opportunity for us to kind of describe to you some of the things that we have to consider as we're prioritizing where to put our resources. And as you well know from recent budget hearings like this, our resources have dwindled sharply over the past few years. We can't do all of the things that people would like us to do. We can't do all the things people have seen us do in recent years. It comes down to what are our core values. Where do we have to put our limited resources to have at least the stable foundation of the kind of county that makes, as I like to say, the from heres and the come heres want to be stay heres. And so tonight we're going to show you a kind of a snapshot of where Wicomico County is, fiscally, where we want to go. There's a different twist this year. We will be presenting, as I say, a balanced budget to the County Council on Tuesday. I hope that that's not going to be the budget that is finally considered. As you know, Annapolis has struggled this year to balance its own budget, and there have been quite a few impacts sent down to local governments. You've heard the debates about the teacher pensions. You've heard over the years some of the other things like the loss of highway user revenues that we use to fund our public works department and pave our roads, funds that we no longer receive from Annapolis in the volume that we used to. We'll have a slide about that. But this year we also came head to head with the issue of how we fund our public schools. And as you know, we're very proud of the fact that Maryland has scored 4 years in a row now as the #1 state in America for educating our youth. And as a parent, I'm glad to hear that. I appreciate that, and I'm sure all of us do. We try to do our best locally to do our share to support education. We often fall short. Not, I don't think, out of any sense that we don't appreciate education, that we don't respect education, but in our position, we have other things. We have to fund a corrections department. We have to support our health department. We have to pave roads. We need to support our libraries. And so we have multiple demands on our limited county resources, and we try to do the best we can. You'll see from the slides tonight that fully 80% of the county budget will go to public safety and health and public education. And when the revenues start to dry up, we're just not able to make the kind of investment that most of us would like to do and that we used to do when times were better. What happened in Annapolis this week was devastating to Wicomico County. Last year, the county applied for a waiver of our obligation to fund our fair share of education, called the Maintenance of Effort Standard. It's a standard of funding that changes from year to year based on enrollment in the schools. We weren't able to come up with enough revenue last year to meet maintenance of effort. So we applied for a waiver from the requirements that the state imposes. Normally, when you make maintenance of effort, then you receive the encouragement, the carrot from the state in the form of increased state funding, which goes back into the school system. Last year there was no state funding available. And so we withdrew our application for the waiver. And when we did that, it based next year's funding on a lower amount, an amount totaling about $36.2 million. Well, there are people in Annapolis who felt that that was somehow avoiding or escaping our true responsibility to give a robust commitment to education. And so there was legislation introduced that would change that base for the maintenance of effort standard. The original legislation would have required the county to come up with an additional $14 million in next year's budget in order to make the new standard. We don't have it. We couldn't have it. We went to Annapolis arm in arm with our Board of Education, with our county council, and we spoke to Chairman Conway, and again, I'm so glad that he's here, and we spoke to people, the leadership in the House of Delegates, about the impact to Wicomico County of that legislation. And almost immediately there was some adjustment made that through legislation we were able to cut that $14 million down in half to about $7 million. Well, in our budget, as you'll see tonight, $7 million is still a very heavy impact, very hefty impact, that again, if we are to find a way to pay it, means we're going to have to take it out of someplace else. And as you'll see, really the only other place with that sort of money available is either in our reserve funds or with our public safety and public health. And so we've been dealing very closely with Chairman Conway and his associates to honor a rebasing of the maintenance of effort formula back to what it was permitted, what was permitted and what was the rules of the game last year when we applied for our waiver. If we're able to accomplish that, and here's where the big if is. As you know, the legislature adjourned at midnight Monday night with a lot of unfinished business. There's talk that the governor may call the legislature back. One of the things that wasn't accomplished was that last accommodation that's going to help put Wicomico County back on the right track with our maintenance of effort standard. We're hoping that the governor will call a special session, and that in that special session, Chairman Conway will be able to complete the work that he's already started that will put us back in business where we can actually take to the county council a budget that meets maintenance of effort based on the lower foundation, and then does a number of other positive things for our community, such as building Bennett Middle School and paving some roads and restoring the furloughs that we imposed on county employees 3 years ago. For once, I would love to be able to pay our county employees what we hired them for 4 years in a row now. They've not been able to collect the salaries that we hired them for. And I think that's unfortunate. It doesn't say it. It's shameful. And so we're trying hard, and we've got the opportunity to come up with an alternative budget that won't look like the one we're going to turn in next week. But it depends on how things work out in Annapolis in the weeks ahead. And so we're going to be very diligent, very vigorous to keep plugging away at that, because the impacts on our community are far-reaching and they're dramatic. And it will impact the kind of community we have to offer to our families and to the people we want to attract to Wicomico County. So I invite you to stay tuned. I invite you to watch as we submit a budget to the County Council next week, but understand we're hoping that there will be a different budget that's actually implemented by the time the County Council finishes its work in June. And so with that, I'd like to introduce the new Director of Administration for Wicomico County, who's going to take us through a slideshow to help set the stage, give us some basic information that we need to understand so that we can better address the challenges that we have. And once he's finished, we'll stay here all night, or as long as it takes for everyone to be heard. We always say that we want to hear from everybody. There's no time limit. We do ask that you come to the mic in the center, state your name, and we do ask that you not be repetitive. But we'll stay here as long as it takes for everyone to tell us how they feel and what they think, whether it's questions, comments, concerns, or complaints. And that's how things work, that's how we learn, that's how we grow. I've said a lot recently about how easy it is for us as citizens to talk about what our rights are. Well, in times like this, we have to talk about the obligations of citizenship. And that means we do have an obligation as citizens and taxpayers to understand what the challenges are facing county government and our national government. We have to understand what they are, and we need to be engaged to offer solutions and offer conversation and dialogue about how we as a community can face those challenges. And so we do hope for a vigorous discussion afterwards. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Strausburg, and we'll take it from there. And again, thanks very much for coming.
As Rick said, we are in an extremely unusual situation. We are continuing to operate in a very volatile environment, and the decisions that we're going to make in concert with the County Council over the course of the next 6 weeks are not only going to have very consequential impacts on the county in the near term, but they'll have very consequential impacts on the county in a longer term. Quite a bit of the factors that will influence where we land are really beyond our direct control. We have the potential to influence those decisions, but we don't have control over those decisions. We're going to continue to diligently pursue relief from some of the legislation that is currently on the books, if you will, and hopefully that will take place. And if that does take place, and we do succeed, then we will be able to present an amended budget that we feel is far more responsive to the needs of the citizens in the county. But in the meantime, given the facts that are on the ground right now, we have no choice but to submit an extremely austere budget. So with that as a backdrop, I'd like to move through some details with you. Just when we thought we were out of the woods, Rick has already covered off on this, so I'm not going to repeat a lot of it, but as it currently stands, Senate Bill 848 passed, and it would require the county to increase our contribution to the Board of Education by $7 million. We had hoped to address that in what's called BRFA, the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act. We are still hopeful that that will take place if a special session is indeed called for, and I think we're very optimistic that that will happen. Currently, what did not pass was a teacher pension shift, but I think that it's reasonable to assume that if a special session is called, that the pension shift will, in fact, proceed in some form. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about state actions over the past several years and in the current year, and potentially as we go forward, that have impacted our budget. Disparity grants were capped, and that caused a $4.2 million impact on our budget. $7 million in highway user fund revenue has been withheld beginning in fiscal year 10. Last year, $739,000 was downstream to fund the State Department of Assessments and Taxation here locally. We've already talked to you about the $7 million maintenance of effort impact. And again, this number keeps moving around, but we potentially have about a $4.1 million impact in teacher pension costs. The phase-in and the final amount are still very fluid. Assuming that there's no special session, there are other impacts that we may possibly be impacted by. A further impact in disparity grants of about $220,000, about $90,000 in aid to the library, and $1.7 million in direct aid to the Board of Education. So we've got close to $26 million in impacts that are really, as I said, beyond our direct control, only subject to our potential influence. As we went into the budget cycle, there were some common planning assumptions in light of what was occurring in the legislature at the time. A local income tax rate increased from 3.1 to 3.2, and I'll cover that in a little bit more detail a few more slides in and explain the rationale behind that. A property tax rate set to meet the revenue cap, not to exceed the revenue cap, simply to meet the rate that is allowable under the revenue cap. It would go to 84.04 cents, which is 7.14 cents over where we are right now. We also were very, very hopeful that the state would essentially, that's code for give us relief on Senate Bill 848, and that we could avoid the $7 million rebasing in maintenance of effort. What we were planning to do before these two emergency bills hit the screen was to fund Bennett Middle School, to restore furloughs, as Rick has said, to restore full funding to our pension and OPEB trusts. We have gone 2 cycles now without funding those trusts. We're still at about 94% of our total liability, which is a very healthy percentage. However, we feel that it's not good public policy to continue that practice for a couple of reasons, because eventually that catches up to you when you find yourself underfunded, but secondly because bond rating agencies watch that very, very carefully, and we don't want to put our bond rating into jeopardy. We wanted to fund some modest capital projects other than Bennett Middle School. We wanted to meet our mandated requirement to relocate the state's attorney's office and to renovate that vacated space in the circuit courthouse, honor our negotiations with the Fraternal Order of Police, which, as you know, are now required of us, and to close the structural budget gap that was caused by what we'll refer to as the Great Recession. And by that we mean that we felt that we were very close to getting our revenue stream in sync with our ongoing expenditures, where we would not have to continually go to our reserve fund to support ongoing operations and modest capital investments. What we will do, if we cannot obtain relief from the $7 million BOE increase, is we will still restore or intend to restore county employees to full pay. We have offset this with departmental budget reductions, so it's net neutral versus last year's budget. We will make a modest contribution to pension and OPEB trusts in order to garner goodwill, if you will, from the bonding agencies, and also to keep that funding level above 90% and continue to honor our negotiations with the FOP. This is what we will have to forgo if we cannot avoid the $7 million bogey. We'll have to forgo the construction of Bennett Middle. We'll have to forgo the completion of James M. Bennett High School. All other capital improvement projects will have to be put on hold. We simply won't be able to afford them in the current fiscal year. We won't be able to provide Warwick Community College with needed additional support. Warwick has been balancing their budget through their reserve fund. This is the last year they can do that. If they have to balance their budget again this year, relying on their reserve fund, it evaporates, it goes to zero. We won't be able to relocate the state's attorney's office and proceed with court renovations. That's already been covered off on until sometime in the future when we've got funds available. And we'll have to take approximately $5.7 million from our fund balance. That represents 36% of the available fund balance that we could have either saved or could have used to address infrastructure issues. Just to talk to you briefly about our fund balance, because I know this is somewhat confusing to people. Let's talk about what is really available, and you can go through the math. You'll see that the figure at the bottom is approximately $15.7 million. $3.5 million of that is I'm not going to say it's speculative, but it's not in the bank yet. So if you're conservative fiscally, and I am, I would not consider that. I would deduct that, and I would say that we're really working with $12.2 million. If we've got to go to our reserve fund to cover the maintenance of effort bust, we can really only do that one time, because now we would have our fund balance down, our available fund balance down to about $6 million. If we went to that well again in the next budget cycle, we would basically be out of reserve, and the county never wants to be there. So we can do this one time if we're forced to, but in my opinion, we can't do it any more than one time. The $7 million level that we're talking about covering, you can see the bars, and you can see that county functions in the FY 2012 budget. The only place to go to find that money is public safety and health. You'll see the education bar is cross-hatched in red, and that's because the legislation in Annapolis puts a firewall around that money. We can't go to it. So that is the stark reality. The stark reality is being put in a place where we're almost forced to choose between public safety and health and education. And that is a choice that this county refuses to make. We're not going to put ourselves there. So what are our next steps? As Rick said, we have to submit a budget by April 17th. We're mandated to do that. The budget must meet the state-imposed requirement to increase funding to the Board of Education as the facts currently stand. We're hoping that a special session will be called and that we obtain relief through BRFA. We will concurrently pursue a waiver request through the State Board of Education in case the legislative relief fails. We will do that in concert with the Board of Education. We will also be prepared to submit an amended budget if we get relief, so that we can then put before council in the budget cycle a budget that we feel is more responsive to community needs. And while we certainly don't want to do this, if all else fails, we would investigate recourse through courts absent any MOE relief. Not an attorney, so I can't opine on what our chances of success would be. Let's talk a little bit about the income tax increase. The reason that that was put on the table is that in Senate Bill 848, any county that had a local income tax rate of 3.2%, which is the state maximum, was exculpated from rebasing. What we tried to do with the legislature was change the wording of that bill a little so that it applied to any county that had that 3.2% rate in effect by the end of this current fiscal year. It takes a minor wording change in Senate Bill 848. You have to change 3 words, essentially to make it prospective as opposed to retroactive. Now, if we did that, that's a 0.1% increase. I've said this before, I'm really opposed to that. It's nothing that I would have ever wanted to do, because I think that our tax structure is such that our high local income tax works against us because of our proximity to other jurisdictions that have either really no income tax or a much lower rate. So from a strategic standpoint in the long term, that's something that I would not have supported. But moving forward with that, as opposed to having to absorb a $7 million annual bust in our budget, is something that I can reluctantly support. A typical citizen would probably see $30 to $50 per year in increased taxes. It really works out to about $10 for every $10,000 of adjusted gross income. If we were to have to go to an increase in the property tax rate, and one of the things you have to realize is that the state bills as passed give the state the ability to intercept our income tax receipts, our local income tax receipts, in order to fulfill that $7 million increased contribution to the Board of Education. So the state has given local legislatures the ability to raise either property taxes or income taxes as high as they need to go in order to fill that void. If we were to go to property taxes and increase that rate to meet that obligation, you would have an impact on citizens. It would be 10 times the impact of raising the local income tax rate by 0.1%. So it's a choice that we felt made sense, and one that we felt that we should go forward with in order to avoid that pain. And hopefully that will still work if there's a special session. The property tax rate, just to walk you through it, for the current year, it's 0.769 cents. To reach constant yield, you add 5.49 cents. To adjust for inflation, you add another 1.65 cents, so the total increase is 7.14 cents. Your new real property tax rate for fiscal year 13 would be 84.04 cents. Whoops, what did I do? I'm going to call Andy Mackel up now to go through what I refer to as the wonky part of the presentation, because he's the master of the budget details, and he can cover this far better than I can.
Good evening, everyone. So I get to deliver the numbers. If you begin at the very top, revenue estimate excluding our use of prior year revenue, $111 million and 300,000. That's what we believe our revenue stream will be, not counting prior year revenue. So the next line, beginning with our FY12 budget at $108 million. That's what we were spending, or projected to spend this year. I fully expect it'll be something less than that, but that was the budgeted amount for FY12. What you see then below are the increments above that amount. The increments above that. So we need to spend some money on, invest in our pension and OPEB contribution. We have not done that for the past 3 years. As has been mentioned, it's time to do that. So about 1/3 of the contribution that we should make would be $1.16 million. The Warwick Community College, we need to give them $54,000. That will keep them, enable them to balance their budget without running out of fund balance. They will use all of their fund balance plus this extra $54,000. Debt service, this is a fact-of-life change. The county's debt is structured differently than a home mortgage. Our payments vary from year to year. In FY13, we have some higher payments to make. Early retirement savings, as you recall, at the very beginning of FY12, we lost, 44 people retired. So that was good for them. It offered the county an opportunity to save some money, either through not backfilling positions or by filling positions at a slightly lower salary or perhaps less benefits. So the savings that accrued through that plan, that action was $160,000. Within that, whenever you have personnel actions, you have some benefit savings as well. We had a good year with our health benefit coverage. Those costs went down. So we have some miscellaneous savings that are embedded outside the normal departmental budgets. Within each department, I sent out, the executive sent out challenges. We challenged our department heads to come back and tell us if they could live with smaller budget amounts based on their historic spend rates. Many of us submit budgets. We've always submitted 10,000. We've always spent 8, but we always ask for 10. So in that instance, we challenged our department heads to come back and say, well, can you budget less and sort of drive that difference between what we budget for and what we spend down. And in this case, we managed to save $355,000, and that's really helps offset the furlough, restoring the furloughs. So I thank our department heads for squeezing down on that. So furlough restoration, within the general fund, we need about $341,000 to do that. And we believe we can cover it in this fashion, and it's a good decision. FOP negotiations, we've made a commitment of $201,000 through that negotiation process, and we intend to submit that as in honor of that negotiation. Fire service in FY12 had their budget reduced by $350,000 for capital sinking fund. We're going to ask for that money to be restored. They also asked for another $6,000 for some decontamination equipment. We've added that in. The library, although there's an outside agency, has followed the county's furlough program. And as we restore furloughs for the county employees, they would like to restore their furloughs as well. And they need some additional support to do that. That's what this $27,000 would do. Animal control and the Humane Society, they've been cut several years in a row, and with some increased activity in the world of animal control, they made a compelling case for the need for part-time animal control, some additional operating funds, so we added that. The senior center that provides Meals on Wheels to our community still has a waiting list of folks who need those services for Meals on Wheels, and we felt that was an outstanding way to spend some additional money and asked the county council to consider an increase of $32,000 to support that Meals on Wheels program. Small Business Development Center came to us for the first time in a long time and asked for a very, very small contribution, which they can then multiply through grant applications with the federal government to help small business development. And we felt that was an excellent investment in economic growth for the county. And our local management board, finally, we cut them quite a bit in FY12. There was some discussion whether or not they might, how do I say that?
Whether they'd survive.
They might not survive the year, so they did, and so they need the sufficient funds to operate fully in FY13. So this restores them to funds that they need to operate, which brings us to a total change of 1.7, really 1.8 million from the beginning budget of 108, and that would be great, except now we need to add that $7 million on that we have to provide to the Board of Ed. Not that we don't want to support education, we do, but we just can't afford $7 million very easily. What we will do, that brings the total to $117 million, revenue at 111. That leaves us 5.66 short. And we will take that out of fund balance. Any questions on that so far? It's a lot of detail. Under the state-imposed budget, our Board of Education budget will be $43.2 million, up from the $36.4 we are expecting it. A debt service that is we pay for the school construction programs that have already gone in the past. It's $10.9 million. So a total of $54.1 million that would go to the Board of Education. That's 46.2% of the county budget compared to the 43.8 in FY12. And if we did not have to provide that $7 million, that would be $41.1 million. That's the last slide. Same format, starting with a revenue at $111 million, fiscal year budget 12 at $108, and the bullets, the small bullets here on the side, are what would we restore. So if we get relief, if we're from the requirement to fund $7 million to the Board of Ed, this is what we would do with that money. This is the foundation of the budget that we would then submit to the, an amendment that we then submit to the County Council, and it would begin with a larger contribution to our OPEB and trust fund, not the full amount, about 75% of what we should contribute. We would honor the maintenance of effort requirement from FY12 base of $36.2 million, and we would add $200,000 to meet that. Our Board of Education has submitted a budget to us already, and they've requested at 2% above that MOE level, and we would honor that request at $500,000. The Warwick Allied Health contribution would be increased from $54,000 to $200,000. Then here, the next large item of interest is the interest payment that would be required in the first year to support Bennett Middle School construction. So when we go to the market, the bond market in the fall, we're required to pay an interest payment within first fiscal year, and that would be $300,000. The roads department would receive an increase. This would allow them to have a level budget from 12 to 13, and that also enables them to perform road work, which is in the capital improvement program. Without that money, their capital improvement program would be virtually zero. The rest of the capital improvement budget, which is available on our website, lots of small projects for the school, for rec and parks, for public works, for the state's attorney. So this 1.5, nearly 1.6 million would then go back in to support the capital improvement program that's already been passed by the council. Orphans Court is a relatively small amount of money, but it means a lot to them. It would enable them to travel to educational opportunities to revitalize, to refresh their professional knowledge in their job. And mosquito control, and important, you know, when you're all sitting around relaxing in the afternoon and mosquitoes are biting you, you appreciate our mosquito control efforts. They've been cut quite severely by the state, and so we'd be providing them another $7,591. And so that's the net difference. Our total budget would be $114.7 million. We're still going to spend $3.4 million out of fund balance, but we feel comfortable with that. Number one, because so much of that money is going to go to infrastructure. That's what fund balance is good for. It's fixed investment in multi-year assets, and it also goes towards our pension contribution. We've been behind in that for several years, so that's the catch-up payments. So those are the details of our two budgets. One under the duress where we have to spend $7 million, and one how we would restore it. Mr. Pollitt.
And now it's your turn. As I say, we're here. We've got the room for the night. We'll stay as long as it takes to hear from everyone who would like to share. I will remind you, though, that this is a public hearing. That means that we're here to hear. You're here to offer, to speak, to share your thoughts and ideas. it's not a debate. We're not going to argue. It wouldn't be fair to everyone who wants to talk if we were to have a debate back and forth about opinions. But we are going to take a record, keep a record of notes of everything that's said tonight. And those that require follow-up, if someone is looking for more information or if someone is concerned about how something works, we'll definitely get back to anyone and try to address any concerns that you might raise. But we definitely want to take the time to allow as many people as would like to come up and share what's on their mind. And as I say, we'll keep a record of it.
Tom Sandler, Colburn Hill Village. I'll kick it off and become the most hated person in the room. The pension, you say, you haven't funded it for a while, 90%. Apparently the doomsday budget seems only to be doomsday to the taxpayers who need to contribute more to the revenue, but less to their own personal retirement plans. It's hard to say. You've got $3 million in the pension. You've got $4 million in the teacher pension. That adds up to $7 million if we just pay them good salaries and say you're responsible for your own retirements. I'm responsible for my own retirement. Why does the taxpayers need to be forced to supply somebody with their own retirement? Why can't they take care of it themselves? Government is not a business. They're not sharing in profits. What you're doing is you're taking from the citizens, from their own retirement plans, to fund other people's retirement plans. Last time I looked, the public sector was getting paid very well, and they could quite considerably contribute to their own retirement plans, even if it's 50%. Then you just saved $3.5 million towards your $7 million goal. Just saying.
Thank you, Tom. Who would like to go next? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Robert Strobel. I'm the president of the Wicomico County Volunteer Firemen's Association. And I looked at your slide there, and the money you put back in this year, and we do appreciate it. But I hope it stays there, because what's happened in the last year, when we got, that money was cut last year, and they don't have the operating funds to do it this year. Some of those smaller fire departments that are outside Salisbury, outer limits of Wicomico County, they're almost at the point that they got to shut down. I was at one meeting one night, and they were almost at the point that they had to go to their membership to get monies to put fuel in their ambulance. You know, public safety should be the very last thing. I understand cuts, you know, and we took the hit. I'm sorry, we took the hit last year. But you know something? We're team players. We said, okay, we'll tighten our belts. There's no way somebody's outlying, and even Wicomico or Salisbury. But the outlying fire departments, there's absolutely no way they're going to be able to survive another year with these cuts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for what you do. You know, there's nothing like a volunteer firefighter. You do things that the rest of us can't do or won't do. We need to do better for you, and I will say this much, that in our time here, there are two areas in the county budget that we have not cut, and I will not cut, and that's the volunteer firefighters, and it's our senior Meals on Wheels program. So thank you very much for what you do.
Thank you.
Who would like to go next?
My name is Johnny Miller, and I'm a resident of Wicomico County. I just wanted to say a few things about this teacher's pension shift. I don't know if the public's aware or not, but the state of Maryland received a negative report from Fitch's. We were warned by Fitch's, the rating agency for Maryland, that our pension fund was severely underfunded, and the governor, he assigned a task force to investigate it, but I'm not sure that the public is really aware of the amount of money that the local counties are on the hang for. I'm going to read you the fiscal note from House Bill 72, the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2011. It's just brief. It says that in December 2010, the Spending Affordability Committee recommended that the fiscal 2012 state budget reduce the state's $2 billion structural imbalance by 33%. This bill implements statutory changes needed to generate the recommended structural changes while also executing temporary measures needed to ensure that the budget is balanced in fiscal year 2012. It says, goes on, it says, the bill also addresses the state's unfunded pension and retiree health liabilities. The Public Employees and Retirees Benefits Sustainability Commission, which was established through the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act of 2010 and met during the fall of 2010, recognized approximately $35 billion in unfunded liabilities and specifically noted that the state's current benefit structure is unsustainable. Well, you see what they've done. They've handed it down to the counties now. So the liability, the fund has been raided. I mean, we're getting a depleted asset. So just by shifting it off to the counties now, and I hope that the state's attorney is listening to this because there's a lot of money that's going unaccounted for. $35 billion is not, it's not small potatoes. So, I just hope you all are prepared for this special session because that's a big item.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Who would like to go next?
Good evening, my name is G.A. Harrison. At the beginning of your talk, Rick, you went and made much over Delegate Conway and all the help he's being in trying to go and fix the problems in Senate Bill 848. But there's a couple of things that concern me about this. First of all, initially, y'all said that we'd be on the hook for an extra $14 million, and then somehow this is magically reduced to $7 million. Now, all this occurred after 848 passed both houses of the legislature, and there is no public information that I've been able to find showing where any changes were made. I mean, so I don't know. So that leads to two conclusions. One, the $14 million was, could have been a red herring to scare taxpayers and draw attention away from the other atrocities that were being committed against taxpayers.
Let me interrupt you just for once, and I promise I won't make a habit of this because I did say we wouldn't have a debate. There was amendments to the legislation that allowed a 15% formula to be applied that did reduce our original proposed $14 million hit down to $7 million. We'll show you the information where that was reflected in the legislation. It wasn't magic.
Maybe, but again, as I said earlier, after the bill passed both houses, you were still going and saying, but we might be on the hook for $14 million.
That's why we don't debate.
And also, another possible conclusion is that, this is an attempt by you and your allies to bolster the reputation of Delegate Conway. And we should all be, the voters of this county, the taxpayers should be reminded that of every member of the legislature from the Eastern Shore, only 2 members voted in support of Senate Bill 848. And that was Delegate Conway and Delegate Rudy King. Only 2 members of the entire Eastern Shore delegation of the legislature voted for House Bill 1412, which, for people who don't know, that's the bill that ends the revenue cap in Wicomico County. That was Delegate Conway, who was a sponsor of the bill, and Delegate King. Now, fortunately, 1412 didn't get a final vote in the Senate, so it didn't pass, but I'm sure it'll be back. Thanks to, and it did now, with Senate Bill 848 in having passed, and MOE being reset, we're in effect being blackmailed by the state. And we've got a Board of Education with zero accountability to the voters of this county. But again, thanks to Delegate Conway, and thanks to Delegate King, and according to Delegate King, as quoted in the paper, thanks to you, Rick, the voters of this county will not even be allowed the opportunity to go and vote on whether or not they would like to have an elected board of education. Now, so we're going to have money thrown at the BOE, and they have zero accountability to the taxpayers of this county. Now, I wanted to bring something else up. Y'all are talking about, raising the income tax rate up 0.1%. It's not a huge, it's not a huge amount percentage-wise. We're already charged the second highest rate in the state, so why not charge the highest? But I hope a majority of our county council, while, because of 848, they don't have much choice. But I hope they go and make it contingent that is only increased if our MOE is set at the FY2012 level and not retroactive, so that we're, what's the point of raising it another 1/10%? If we're not going to go, if we're going to, because either way, if MOE is reset $7 million, $7 million, it's reset $7 million. So why raise the tax rate? And y'all should go and get an answer on that, or like I said, I hope the council goes and makes it contingent on that happening, because quite honestly, unless you're willing to make a commitment now that you would agree to sign a bill, the county council pulling that back, it would have, then, it doesn't help, for them to go and say, oh, well, later on we'll go and lower the rate and have you veto it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Who would like to go next?
Dr. Craig Belcher, resident of Wicomico County and Salisbury business owner. And Rick, feel free to butt in if I'm saying anything that's incorrect here. I'm just trying to understand. We've got two proposed budgets. The one granted is a bit of an austerity budget, and this is the one that has been proposed to address the situation if we do have a $7 million maintenance of effort assessment. However, in the absence of that, we're able to avoid that $7 million assessment. The second proposed budget does quite a bit of funding of things that we seem to be able to avoid if we have the $7 million assessment, but we're still funding to the point where we're now digging into our savings to fully fund that budget. And as Wayne pointed out, these are unusual times, and we don't know when this Great Recession is going to end. And as he already pointed out as well, we really don't want to be digging into that savings more than maybe once. So we're going to do all this funding with our second proposed budget. If we are able to avoid the $7 million maintenance of effort assessment, why in the world would we want to roll the dice and dig into savings that once to fund all of these things that we've already agreed? It's tough when you can't fund the stuff that you'd really like to. But why would we be proposing as a secondary budget, digging ourselves further into debt or digging into savings if we really don't have to? I mean, let's face it, the private sector in this county is already heavily taxed. You're proposing a slight increase in taxation, but other than at some point us being pushed to put further pressure on eliminating, and there's already been, let's be honest, there's already been talk about eliminating the so-called property tax cap, which is, again, not a cap, it's a limitation. There's going to be tremendous pressure if we get ourselves into a fiscal bind to do something with that. So why, again, as our second proposal, are we going to dig ourselves a little hole that maybe the year after that we find that we're still in trouble? Things haven't changed, things haven't improved. So, I mean, I understand this is not a debate format, but I would love to hear, something addressed about.
No, I'll just say this, that's an honest question, and it's a valid question. There are others in the community who don't see that spending as frivolous or unnecessary when James or the Bennett Middle School is at the head of that list, or there's $1.5 million in other long-delayed infrastructure projects. That's why we have this type of forum, so that the community can come out and say, we think that's a good plan so that we can have that middle school, or we think that's a good plan so we can pave some roads again after going for the last couple of years with no real roads program. That's a debate for the community to have, and your opinion is certainly very valid. I'm hoping that we'll hear other opinions as well. My commitment is to build that Bennett Middle School because we need that school, and I know that our community supports it. We've seen evidence of that as we've gone through the capital process. But that I don't challenge your opinion because I think it's a valid opinion. But I hope that we'll hear other opinions from the community. That's why we're here.
Well, just to clarify, I don't think I brought up the building or the replacement of a serviceable school. The issues between the two proposed budgets and why we've got an austerity budget on the one hand, and yet, if we're not on the hook for $7 million of unforeseen assessment due to maintenance of effort, why then would we dig into savings to fund a lot of things that we've already agreed with the first proposed budget that we can get by without? Yes, it's painful, but
That's why we're here. We want to hear from the community.
thanks.
Thank you.
Mark Kilmer, Wicomico County. This is actually kind of, goes off something that Greg was saying. I was thinking, because I saw in your second budget, you more fully fund the pension system, which I disagree with Greg there. I mean, you guys need to fully fund that now, or else, in 10 years, it's going to be a real problem for us. But I don't know if you take questions here, but my question is, obviously pension issues are going to be a big problem for the county, not just the state, like John Miller was saying. What power does the county have to address the pensions that county employees get? Are you looking at changing the pension system to, maybe alleviate some of the fiscal pressures that we'll be facing in a decade or 2 decades? I mean, obviously you won't be county executive then again, in those years probably, but, what, on the pension issue specifically, how much power do you have to change the pensions? Is that something you're looking at, looking forward? I guess that's just a question that kind of came up when we were thinking about this.
Sure, that is something that we do control, and that is something that's on the table. I think it's incumbent upon us to put everything on the table where we have an influence and a role to play. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is John Palmer. For those who don't know it, last week after the county council meeting, there was a open council meeting. Unfortunately, there was only 4 citizens who remained for it, who showed any interest in it. But during that meeting, I saw a lot of what-if scenarios between our executive and the legislative side, and I think it would have been nice if the public had been able to see that part on PAC 14, because it was pretty interesting. A couple points I did notice is somebody mentioned Moody's. And Wayne, I have been in touch with Moody's. I've read the report, and I can strongly encourage you to start funding that pension fund that we have been borrowing money from. The same as what the state has been borrowing money from, the teachers fund. Because if not, I can just about guarantee you your rating is going to take a hit. The second thing, Council President Joe Holloway asked a what-if question during the scenario, and he said, what would happen if we stayed away from the bond market for a couple years? And I kept listening for some answers, and everybody talked around that, but there was no real answer that was put into any of the formulas. I would like to see I would like to see you, Mr. Pollitt, come up with a plan that would put a what-if scenario in there that would say, what would happen if we stayed away from the bond market for 2 years, and put it in there and let the public see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kay Gibson, Wicomico County. It's kind of hard to discuss a what-if budget. I'm sure you're having as much trouble with it as I am. I'll take a deep breath. I'm wondering if you have considered pension fund changes. Other states have increased the contribution of their employees towards their own pensions. I agree we need to fund, but we're relatively well funded at 94%, considering the state is funded at something like 60%. So maybe it's time for us to look at the budget, but to look at the pensions with the employees contributing more. I also understand that we want to be fair to our employees and want to give back furlough days. We don't need to give them all back in 1 year. Maybe, so that we don't get into our reserve fund, we need to look at returning some of the furlough days this year and maybe doing some next year. And yes, we may have to look at the functions of public safety and the sheriff's department. I live in town, so indeed I am paying twice. I'm not sure that that's reasonable. I'm not sure that all the functions of the sheriff's department and the health department need to happen. Maybe we need to carefully examine what we are doing and not just hand out a blank check. It's hard when we've got two budgets here, because I look over here and I see Warwick Allied Health Building contribution. I'm not sure if that's what I'm thinking it is. Is that part of the gymnasium or the exercise or health room, or is that part of the health education?
That's what it is.
Okay, because I was just looking at that and I'm going, what is this really?
That's part of the curriculum at the community college, yes, ma'am.
And that's one of those things we do need to be funding if at all possible. But we need to go through, I can't figure out why we need to touch the reserves if we get the 7 million relief. And we don't need to be touching the reserves. We need a balanced budget. None of us want to see the taxes go up, but sometimes there's reality. And most of us, be perfectly honest, in Wicomico County, don't have a lot of extra money. And when the taxes go up, it means a sacrifice. And it means something we have to do without, because most of us aren't getting a raise next year. So please remember that money's tight for all of us, and it's going to be tight for the county, I understand, but that's not unreasonable. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Gibson. Well, if that's the case, I do want to thank you once again for coming and sharing with us. You know, that's the great thing about our community, and Mr. Harrison, that's the great thing about being an American. We can say what we want to say, we can challenge each other, we can do it civilly. Doesn't mean either one of us are right or wrong, but we take advantage of our rights as citizens. And again, as I say, I encourage all of us to take a serious look at our obligations as citizens. Learn as much as you can about what we're trying to accomplish in Wicomico County, what kind of community we're trying to build, and then become a part of that solution. Your being here tonight is becoming a part of that solution, and I do thank you very, very much for coming.